Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is our continuation of our refutation of the book by Mr. Lance Conley, entitled Hope Resurrected. I have shared with you so far several videos on the reality that the foundation of Mr. Conley's entire book, his exegesis, if you want to call it that, it's not really exegesis, but nonetheless, his exegesis of 1 Corinthians 15 has his doctrine of the election lying behind it. And so I'm focusing on this particular aspect in order for you to be able to see that the foundational doctrine, the foundational text that he appeals to for his doctrine of the election, which is Romans 11, 25 to 27, is completely off base. Now, I don't have to tell you, if you are a Bible student, that Romans 11, 25 to 27 has been, continues to be in many ways, one of the most perplexing and challenging sets of verses in all of the New Testament. I used to struggle with it mightily. I'm not going to tell you that I don't still have some questions about it, but I do know the framework for it. I do know the framework for its fulfillment that is so clearly set forth by Paul's citation of the Old Testament prophecies that he was anticipating to be fulfilled at the salvation of Israel in Romans 11. Now, by the way, one of the Old Testament prophecies that I'm not going to take the time to get into, but I would like to recommend to you that you do some study on it. But Paul cites and quotes from Psalms 69 in Romans chapter 11. His citation of that text proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that the point of consummation, the point of Israel's salvation, was to be the point of Israel's destruction. This concept of salvation and judgment being intertwined with one another. These concepts are Siamese twins that cannot be separated from one another. Now, here's what that means for Mr. Conley, ever so briefly before I get back into the text this morning. Since, and by the way, I demonstrate this beyond any shadow of a doubt in my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution to Romans 11, 25 to 27. I have an entire chapter devoted to the reality, the undisputable, the irrefutable, the undeniable reality that biblically Israel would be saved at the time that the nation was destroyed. That is to say, the remnant would be saved at the time of the destruction of the nation. Now that is absolutely critical. But here's what this demands in Mr. Conley's paradigm. When he wants to talk about the salvation of Israel at the second coming of Christ, which is his view of Romans 11, 25 and following, it demands that at some point of time in the future, when all Israel is saved, it means that Israel would be destroyed. Israel would be judged. Well, if Israel's going to be judged, then she is under God's covenant and covenant wrath at that time. But that's enough of that for the moment. I introduced to you last week the reality that is not disputed by any scholar that I know of. That is, Paul predicts the salvation of all Israel at the coming of the Lord. He quotes from Isaiah 27 and Isaiah 59, as well as Jeremiah 31, 29 and following. And by the way, he also echoes Daniel chapter 9 in the promise of the taking away of sin, because Daniel 9 foretold 70 weeks are determined to put away sin. And since the 70 weeks of Daniel are confined to the 70 weeks, and since the 70 weeks extend no further than the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, then that means, guess what? That means that Romans 11, 25 to 27 cannot be extended beyond AD 70. But to return to Isaiah. Paul quotes verbatim from Isaiah chapter 27. Now, I'm going to read again what I read for you last week. I'm going to begin reading with verse 7. Has he, that's Yahweh, struck Israel as he struck those who were struck by him? In other words, has God killed Israel like he killed others? Has he, that's Israel, been slain according to the slaughter of those who were slain by him? Now watch this. In measure. Folks, this, as I pointed out last week, this cannot be talking about individuals. You don't sort of, kind of, in measure, kill an individual, do you? I mean, that's just, it doesn't even make good nonsense. So the question is, has the Lord killed Israel like he killed others? The answer, yes, in measure. How did Yahweh partially kill Israel? Verse 8, by sending it, the nation, away. You contended with it. He removes it by his rough wind in the day of the east wind. Therefore, by this. By what? What is the antecedent of this? Sending her away. What is the antecedent? Partially killing Israel. By this, the iniquity of Jacob will be covered. This is all the fruit of taking away his sin. When, former preterists sure don't like time statements. Well, I don't know how anyone can claim to be a serious Bible student and just wave their hand at all of the inspired time statements in the Bible. But that's what they do. They ignore them, they distort them, they pervert them. But they won't go away, ladies and gentlemen. This salvation of Israel, the taking away of her sin by sending her away, would take place, quote, when he makes all the stones of the altar like chalk stones that are beaten to dust. Wooden images and incense altar shall not stand. Yet the fortified city will be desolate, the habitation forsaken and left like a wilderness. Therefore, the calf will feed, it will lie down, consume its branches. When its boughs are withered, they will be broken off. The women come and set them on fire. For this is a people of no understanding. Therefore, he who made them will not have mercy on them. The one who formed them will show them no favor. Now, I'll get back to this in just a moment. But I want us to see something that's very, very critical. This prediction is tied to several other eschatological events in the narrative of overall eschatology. Now, I want you to notice that verse 2 says, in that day, sing to her, a vineyard of red wine. I, the Lord, keep it. I water it every moment, lest any hurt it. I keep it day and night. So here we have the promise of Israel's salvation. Notice verse 1. In that day, the Lord with his severe sword, great and strong, will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent. Leviathan, that twisted serpent, he will slay the serpent or the reptile that is in the midst of the sea. Now, unless you want to be a really rigid literalist and claim that this Leviathan is a literal serpent, beast, reptile that's to be destroyed at the end of time, then you would agree with the ancient rabbis who believed that the identification of Leviathan here is Satan. Oh, by the way, that agrees with Revelation 12. It agrees with Revelation chapter 20. Leviathan was Satan to be destroyed at the coming of the Lord at the end of the millennium. So this salvation of Israel of Isaiah chapter 27, the taking away of Israel's sin, at the time when the temple would be forsaken, the time when the altar would be turned to chalkstone, and when the people that the Lord had created would no longer find mercy, would be at the time of the destruction of Leviathan. Oh, but that's not all. Notice this, in that day. Well, verse 2, what day is that? In the day of the destruction of Leviathan. Okay, that's fine. But in that day, the day of the destruction of Leviathan refers back to verse 20 and 21. Well, what does verse 20 and 21 tell us? Come, my people, enter your chambers, shut the doors behind you, hide yourself, as it were. See, here is a very clear case of the Lord relativizing time. In other words, it's not literally just a little while. It's as it were for just a little while, until the indignation is past. For behold, the Lord comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth will also disclose her blood and will no more cover the slain. Well, as virtually every scholar acknowledges, this is the time of the vindication of the martyrs. Okay. That means that in that day when Leviathan is destroyed is the time when the martyrs would be vindicated. When did Jesus tell us that the martyrs would be vindicated? Well, Matthew chapter 23 is pretty clear. Upon you will come all of the blood of all of the righteous shed on the earth, from righteous Abel unto Zacharias son of Barachias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all of these things will come upon this generation. And once again, this generation doesn't mean this tribe, this kind of people. It was upon you will come all of these things. Upon the very people that he said, which of the prophets have you not slain? You testify that you are the sons of the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. Now, folks, who was it that killed the prophets? I'm sorry, it wasn't Assyria. I'm sorry, it wasn't Babylon. They tried. Babylon tried and couldn't kill a prophet, remember? The only nation that killed the prophets was Old Covenant Israel. So this is the judgment, the vindication of the martyrs at the coming of the Lord to vindicate the blood of the martyrs. That's the time of the destruction of Leviathan. That's the time of the salvation of Israel. When would that be? When the fortified city of Jerusalem was destroyed. When the altar would be turned to chalkstone. When the people whom the Lord had created. Now, who is this? Who is this? Well, that statement is taken directly from Deuteronomy chapter 32, 18 and following. This people of no understanding. Deuteronomy 32 is the song of Moses about Israel's last days. Not about the end of time. It's not about the end of the current Christian age. It is about Israel's last days. And thus, here's what we have. Paul in Romans chapter 11 foretold the salvation of Israel at the time of the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 26 and 27. Isaiah 26 and 27 posits the salvation of Israel at the coming of the Lord for the vindication of the martyrs, when Leviathan / Satan would be destroyed, and that would be when Jerusalem, the temple, and the people were destroyed. Now, some like to claim, oh, well, this is talking about the Assyrian captivity. Sorry, folks, not true. The Assyrian invasion of Israel under Sennacherib, number one, did not destroy Satan. Number two, it did not destroy Jerusalem. You ought to read Isaiah 36 or 30 through 37. Jerusalem was spared from the Assyrian invasion. Assyria did not destroy Jerusalem. Oh, and Assyria did not destroy the temple. Jerusalem was delivered. So you can't make this passage a prediction of the Assyrian captivity or the Assyrian invasion of Israel. This is a prediction of the time of the salvation of Israel at the destruction of Satan. Oh, by the way, which Paul said, and now, Paul writing in the 60s AD, said, now the God of peace will crush Satan, that's Leviathan, under your feet shortly. Isaiah 27, and thus Romans 11, 25 to 27, was about to be fulfilled. It was not fulfilled at any time before the coming of the Lord for the vindication of the martyrs, when Jerusalem and the temple and the people were destroyed, with the salvation of the remnant attending. So if Mr. Conley puts this in the future, and he does put Romans 11, 25 to 27 in the future, then of logical, scriptural, contextual necessity, Mr. Conley must believe, number one, that Israel is still in covenant relationship with the Lord, because this is all about a covenant judgment on Israel. Number two, he must take the position. He must take the position that at some point of time in the future, Jerusalem and a rebuilt temple will be destroyed at the time of the judgment of Israel. I'm sorry, that's just inescapable. You cannot appeal to Romans chapter 11 for a yet future coming of the Lord without at the same time appealing to Isaiah 27, because Paul believed, Paul taught, Paul said in Romans 11 that his anticipation of the salvation of Israel at the coming of the Lord would be in fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 27. That pretty effectively destroys Mr. Conley's book. Listen, get a copy of my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution to Romans 11, 25 to 27, in which I have an in-depth exegesis, actually, of Isaiah 24 through 27, explicating all of this and a whole lot more. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order the book. Just go to the store, order the book. Make sure to send me a note saying you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, and that'll save you $5. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. You have a fantastic weekend. Please be safe. God bless. See you on Monday.